My name is Samantha Pang. I'm from HelpShift, which is now part of Kewords Studios. We are an AI and driven conversational support platform that provides the support experience for mobile, of course, but also PC and console. With me today is Pascal. Let him introduce his experience in gaming.
Yes, so hi, my name is Pascal. I work at Rovio as the player support lead, and yeah, I'm all about sharing my experiences with Keywords and HelpShift.
Thank you, Pascal, for joining us today. I want to start by asking you, how does Rovio think about the player support experience in relation to your game success? And what is your current vision for the ideal player experience? And this will segue nicely into the rest of our chat.
All right, so as you may know, Rovio Entertainment has this small IP which is called Angry Birds. You might have heard about it. So our mission is to create games that people will enjoy for years to come. And in order to do that, we have also come up with the idea that it's not enough to actually just make great games, but we need to operate our games in such a way that they can engage and retain players for a longer time than just first 30 days or something like that. And tied with that, that means that we need to be able to provide experiences that are suitable for our users, but especially as well suitable whenever they get into trouble. Because our motto is that we want to make sure that players don't have to worry about what's going on in the game. We're trying to help them to get back as fast as possible within the game so that they can just enjoy the game. That's it.
I've heard that a lot from the mobile gaming companies we work with, especially with all of the changes from Apple's side and kind of all the data privacy, the retention has definitely become a lot more important. Next question I want to ask you is about your change in your support tech stack. You've made some major changes in 2023, moving off a primarily email-based support platform to HelpShift. So starting your journey on AI and automation at Rovio, can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to do that and what were some of the sort of the objectives in doing that?
Yeah, so like Sam said, indeed, we were using an email-based system, and that was one of the main things that we wanted to get rid of, because it makes no sense when people are playing mobile games that they actually would need to open up another browser or an email client and actually start typing their message in there, while they could be just in the game, send a support message through the game. The SDK from HelpShift, for instance, would get all the data that we would need in order to assist the player. So that was one of the main things. There are a couple other points. I'm just going to list them. They're not in any order of importance, but they might shape the whole picture. So one of the other things that we were actually noticing was that by having an email-based service provider, we actually could not double down on our efforts in order to increase deflection. And deflection is actually one of the main things that we wanted to look at, because it made no sense to us that we would have human workforce answering what we would call dumb contacts, so questions that a person would have to which the answer should be quite obvious. Does it make any sense if you have particular kind of question as being asked 100 times? What's the point of having a human workforce actually work on that? You should either automate that, or you should provide an FAQ that a user can read so that they can get the answer there. By doing that, you also are able to push them back into the game faster, because they don't need to wait for that particular response that has been in your canned response folder or something like that. So our deflection was, before we migrated to HelpShift, was 20%. After we migrated to HelpShift, just by implementing HelpShift, we actually bumped it up by 40%. So we have actually a bit more even. It's 63 that we are at right now. So from 20, we went to 63 just by implementing HelpShift. Another reason was that our service provider was not focused on games, which to us that made it a big hurdle, because they did not understand the pain points that we were talking about. There was also the billing model. The billing model was technically based on seats instead of volume, or how you actually deal with volume, which all means that you're more dependent on human workforce, which inflates your cost, especially if you have inflation. So that was also one thing. And while they actually offered bots and automation, they were very clunky, and they did not allow for a lot of customization, which meant that while we were paying premium price for automation and bots, we never saw actually the return of investment on that. So all that linked together, that made us want to switch.
Thank you, Pascal. I remember when you were at Next Games, that was our first interaction, and we hadn't launched bots yet at that time, and you had left Next Games, and then you went to Hatch, and then it was Rovio. And I think when we first had the conversation about switching to HelpShift, and I shared some of the deflection rates in the automation KPIs, you didn't really believe me.
I had to take it with a grain of salt. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
they're promising like heaven and earth. So obviously I was going to be like, okay, I had worked with HelpShift in the past. So I had the idea that, yes, what they have is valuable. I can see the benefits towards the player experience. But I was cautious about it. But I have to say, like, damn, it actually does work. So this is not, I'm sorry for saying it, but this is not bullshit. Definitely.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And just to kind of clarify, we didn't really build HelpShift intended for the mobile gaming industry. I think they found us because they're all trying to keep players inside the game when they need help and not take them out to a browser or get an email because retention is just becoming so important. And just the game behavior of mobile, it's like, few minutes at a time rather than PC console, which there's a bit more patience to wait for support. And our journey is about starting with FAQs. And just by having good quality content, you can really drive self-service. And you're not trying to deflect the player, you're just trying to provide content for most commonly asked questions. So that does really work. And what we see typically is clients that move off an email-based platform and come into HelpShift, immediately they see a 20 to 40% volume drop because of the FAQs as kind of the first stage for a player to really try and self-service. So I'm really glad you saw those results, and we're just starting the journey. I mean, our benchmark is 90% for FAQs deflection, and you're at 63. So I think we can work together to bring that up more.
I truly believe so, because when we had it implemented at Next Games, I did get to 96
And
even.
they're
So
still
I know it is
maintaining it.
possible.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah.
amazing. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we're just here to make sure that we can provide a good support experience for our mobile gaming community. So really appreciate that you were able to achieve that and followed some of our best practices to get there, which is what we really want to do, is have the SDK out of the box, and then all of the customizations can be done without heavy developer work, and you can tune the experience as your games or player behavior changes as well. So moving on to the next question. This scale of change that you did at Rovio was across 23 games, right?
Correct.
Multiple studios?
Yes.
I can't even remember the number. You told me before.
5 studios, 23 games.
23 games. There's new ones and there's older games as well. So we definitely had to create a very solid plan. I only saw the plan that we worked together, but I can't imagine what it's like internally to kind of develop that strategy and the human resources behind kind of planning out that migration. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you kind of navigated change management? Because the larger the gaming studio, the larger it is, the effort and also the key stakeholders that you need to get buy-in from.
Okay, let's book this room for 30 more minutes if I am going to have to do the whole story, but I'll keep it like quite top level. We already knew for a long time that our provider was not a provider that we would partner up with for a very long time. We were already planning 1 year before we signed with HelpShift that we were going to go into a particular kind of direction where we would want to utilize automation and bots a lot more. That actually meant that, well, 1 year before we actually made the shift, we already started to review the way how we had set up FAQs, how our canned responses were set up. So where we were working with emails before, we could use long text or long form text. That would not work with bots. You cannot on a mobile device send a user like 120 lines on this is how you do this in the game or how you utilize this feature. So we already started dividing up our canned responses into particular kind of steps that we thought this is where a bot would have this interaction. Then the end user or the player would actually respond with this with this answer or this answer. Let's already create a wireframe of what kind of forks we would have into our interactions with the bots. So we already started doing that way ahead. And had we not done that, I am quite sure that we would have run into serious problems, especially because we had a huge amount of games in our portfolio in order to deal with. So what we also had to think about was how do we consolidate technically everything from all our games, but also all our studios. Because we had, as Rovio, we had acquired several studios, started up new studios, and we had these different kind of cultures within each of these studios, while still being part of the bigger Rovio kind of culture, but it also meant that the operations worked completely differently. They had different ways of working. So we tried to consolidate everything like that. We tried to put on paper, or digital paper, what the ideal ways of working would be with support, how we would actually transition from an email-based service provider to an in-app service provider. What we also did was we did our homework with our central tech team, because what we knew was that we can just like integrate HelpShift and that would solve it. No, obviously not, because that would just allow us to like just send responses or put automations out there, but it would be working on no data. So what we had to do was use our centralized data platform and try to integrate that with it, or at least link with HelpShift, so that when an agent actually gets a conversation from a player, they would have a link that would immediately bring them to the dashboard of that particular player profile so that they could interact on that. But also on the other end, we also could pull data from our centralized data platform and put it into HelpShift so that we can run automations and bots on top of that data, which makes it super powerful because that would allow us to like create the ideal workflows, make sure that people who have been stuck with a particular kind of problem or have a particular kind of spend tier, that they would follow a different kind of flow than someone else would. Same with languages. If you have like one market where you know that there's a particular kind of event going on and it's not in other language-based markets, then you can just use that data and create a workflow to actually just only get those people in a particular kind of queue, have that visible to particular kind of agents. Yeah, I'm nearing those 30 minutes already, I have the feeling. There is a lot more that I can tell, but it was not a small feat. It definitely it isn't. And I think, well, when we're touching on pitfalls, I think I can elaborate a bit more about this, but it's not to be underestimated what you're doing. It is not just yanking out one system and replacing it with another. You need to be fully prepared with that. You need to assess the risks.
Not to mention that you went from 20% automation, which is kind of the threshold you hit with the previous platform, and then coming into HelpShift, where we started you with 50% automation, and then adding AI on top of it. So how did you orchestrate all of that, and what were your kind of thinking behind testing AI and automation with us?
I'm actually still not sure that I fully realize how we actually managed to do it, to be fairly honest. No, what we did is that we did it piece by piece, right? Like instead of just like going full on with this and trying to implement it at the same time in 23 games, that's like crazy. That you should not be doing that. Also, we did not have the resources to do that because someone still has to make games, or answer players, or assist your vendors. So what we did was that we kind of like identified a couple of key games in our portfolio where we thought like, okay, if we would change out our current provider with HelpShift, we would potentially see the most benefit out of this. So those are the ones that we immediately went for. We did a couple of those, and it seemed to work more than we actually anticipated. Like quite honestly, like we did almost not do anything. Like other than the stuff that we had already been preparing for a year ahead. So I'm sorry for saying we did nothing, because technically we did a lot. But it was, in the end, it was relatively effortless, the last bits of that. So we weren't setting up like a lot of automation. We weren't utilizing the bots a lot in the beginning. But once we started doing that, we did it piece by piece. And we, again, have been like needing to redo bots. We have been needing to redo automations. Every time when we started adding a game in the beginning, we felt like, okay, no, we need to review this. This doesn't work anymore like this. We kind of like had to sit down at one point and say like, okay, it's time that we determine what is the ideal setup for us in order to actually build up our automations. How is it applicable to all of our titles within the same IP? Because that would make it the easiest. And since the majority of our games actually rely on Angry Birds, well, that was rather easy. But I would definitely have to say we would not have been able to do this if we didn't allocate one resource within our team that actually was 120% dedicated to figuring out how Helpshift actually would work, how it would work best within our portfolio, and that they would actually lead the efforts. And with 120%, that did not mean that they actually had to do overtime. That's not the point.
I think what really worked well was we were able to take your data history without the PII in your old system, run it through our AI system that helped you with understanding your most common problems that players were contacting you about, and then being able to design the AI and automation roadmap from that. And I think that's why you felt it was a little effortless, because that's basically our model. We start the journey with AI to understand the player's problem. Once you identify the problem, then you can send them down a defined path that a bot handles to collect some information, verifies their identity, and then decides whether to hand over to an agent to finish off the process or talk to your backend system, in which case Pascal did integrate his backend game data system to Helpshift, so we're able to push and pull data based on that defined workflow. And I think that's how we kind of have a very structured plan that allows us to iterate and continue testing with data behind it. So talk about, then tell us some of the pitfalls or learnings that you learned along deploying AI and automation with us.
All right, so early on, we had figured out that this is me touching back on this whole point of like 23 games, game teams having autonomy about how they're implementing things. You just can't. You have to like put your foot down. You have to just explain that, okay, this is the one type of integration that you can do. It has to work similarly. Because otherwise, if you have 23 games, you have 23 different setups of Helpshift, then that means that you need 23 different types of procedures in order to deal with one particular kind of issue. So that makes no sense. So try to get all your game stakeholders together and try to make them aware of like, okay, if we unify these kind of things, if we consolidate and we do it in a particular kind of way, it's going to be so much more efficient and so much easier. And well, you can use success stories from the previous kind of games and utilize that to convince your stakeholders. That's what we did. Another thing that you need to be extremely, extremely mindful of is that implementing something like this, and especially like working with AI, it's not a one-time investment. It's not like, hey, I'm going to have this one person dedicate this whole week into setting this up and it's going to be done. No. You have to constantly be meddling with it. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's like every game works kind of differently. Your audience works differently, so you're going to have to fine-tune constantly. So it is a lot of work, actually, and especially when you are changing something, it might have an impact on other aspects of the experience, so then you have to fine-tune it there. But still, having that kind of investment, someone who can constantly like keep an eye on things, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it, because that is how you can control the experience towards your players. I'm quite sure that yesterday we were having drinks that we were talking about some other things, but now I can't come up with. I did not drink that much. That's not the reason, though.
No, that's good. I think, in summary, it's really, it's garbage in, garbage out for AI. So you do have to invest a little bit of time understanding the data and what we want to do initially for the training, and then having an iterative process with data, right? And then, working closely with your team. We also have our own data science team. So I think that makes the process a little bit more manageable. And we'll get there, and we did. In 9 months, we were able to get everything onboarded and working correctly, and you hit your KPIs that I promised.
Yeah, and you're right, 9 months, 23 games in 9 months' time. Like, wow.
So I want to move on to another AI topic, which is machine translation. In 2023, this is definitely kind of one of the top things we heard from gaming companies, that they were starting to think about machine translation. I know you've been testing it, so can you tell us a little bit about that experience and sort of the potential outcomes you think about when you test machine translation?
Yeah, so what actually matters a lot is, well, this is tying into a little bit of a different topic, but I already touched on that as well. It's like speed of response. Like, it's more important the faster you actually like reply to a user. Using machine translation, it also means that users technically can get service in their native language faster. Using humans in order to actually provide that native language experience, it's quite costly. So I would say that's the main one there. Yeah.
What we've also seen is now players that have languages where you can't provide that human touch is now able to get support 24/7. And what we are seeing is that for gaming companies who never provided that support in the native language and just started with machine translation, they actually see CSAT go up in that language. So it kind of helped us understand that players just want to get support fastest at the end of the day, and they're accepting the quality of machine translation, which is also getting better. So in the interest of time, this is our last question. What KPIs do you look at when you're kind of testing AI and automation?
Obviously CSAT. I mean, I know it's a little bit of a vanity metric, but it at least like it gives you the right kind of direction of like how accepting our players of machine answers. Turns out not always as much as with humans, but the trade-off is actually better, in my opinion. And it changes completely when you're starting to use like language translate. Language AI or yeah, machine translations actually. Then it works actually really well. Another one is reopen rate. Like that's also one that we're actually looking at, trying to see if a bot or AI has been responding to a player, is the user satisfied with it, or will they want to actually reopen the ticket? So I would say those are the main important ones. Actually, no, the third one, speed of response, obviously, because we've been talking about that. Yeah, speed of response. Like we have games where it takes less than a second to get a response.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
You're welcome.
And sorry to chase you off. It's like so much stuff in there. I mean, thank you. Round of applause for them, please. Thank you.